So today's video is maybe the last video I'll film before the end of the year. It's going to be a sort of like end of the year book wrap up. I know there's like tags and stuff, like the end of the year book tag, but I don't always like all the questions that it includes, so I kind of just scraped together like the categories that I wanted to discuss and that I thought would be interesting. This may be the last video I put out before the end of the year, just because of the holiday season and Christmas, and I'll be visiting people. Actually, I'm going on a pretty major vacation, sort of at the beginning of the new year. Very excited. I'll tell y'all about it like when I come back. So I probably won't put up another video until the new year. I do already have planned what I want to make. I want to make like a most anticipated books of 2025 and like go in detail like throughout the months of what I'm looking forward to. I love watching those videos, so I just wanted to make one. But for today's video, it's just going to be kind of a hodgepodge. It'll be like end of the year book wrap up, as well as any lingering books I need to haul, and that sort of thing. So it's probably gonna be a longer one. I don't know. Let's get into it nonetheless. So first off, I wanted to do a little wrap up. So I'm going to do 4 categories. 4. I'll do my favorite books of the year, my biggest disappointments of the year, my biggest surprises of the year, and lastly, I will do sort of an overview of my most anticipated books of 2025. Like I said, I'm going to make a video in the new year about like all the books I'm looking forward to. So that'll be a more like detailed list, but this is just like the main books that I'm really excited for. It's like 6. I think I have like 6 listed, so definitely not all the books in the next year, but like the big heavy hitters, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we're going to start out with my favorite books of the year. I have 3 listed here. The first one is my favorite book of the year, which, if you know me, will come as no surprise. It is The Sunshine Court by Nora Sakavic. I am the biggest All for the Game fan. It is my favorite series of all time, and this is the spin-off sort of series following a different character. And I just loved it. It came out, I think, in April of this year. We follow Jean and Jeremy and a lot of the Trojans team, which is a different team from the original series. Again, since this is my favorite book series of all time, I'm very like protective of it. It's a mafia sports romance, so to speak, but it also, in my opinion, has some of the best characterization, best relationship dynamics, best writing. I love Nora Sakavic's writing. And it's sort of everything to me. I think about these characters all the time. The sequel to this, The Golden Raven, is coming out either late this year or early next year. I think it's sort of unknown just because the author releases it. These are not traditionally published, thank God. I don't want any publisher getting their hands on these. And yeah, this was my favorite book of the year. I reread it recently. I reread it multiple times since it came out. Yeah, just this series is everything to me. And I don't even know how to talk about it. But yeah, by far, The Sunshine Court. If you have taste similar to mine, you'll probably like this series. If not, it's not for you, that's okay. But it's definitely for me. So yeah, 5 out of 5 stars, The Sunshine Court. The next favorite book of the year is one I read recently, so you'll probably recognize it. It is The Mask Falling by Samantha Shannon. I just talked about the series. This is the 4th book in the Bone Season series. It's about a sort of futuristic dystopian London, and we follow our main protagonist, Paige, as she is fighting against this sort of alien government that is seeking to control all magic users in her world. It's such a good character and plot forward series. I hadn't read this fourth book came out, I think, in 2021, and I hadn't caught up with the series since like 2017. So I was worried I wouldn't like it as much, but I loved it. So yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite books of the year. I cannot wait for the next book. So excited. But yeah, this is The Mask Falling. Highly recommend this series to any like fantasy dystopian lovers. And the third book, the third favorite book of the year for me, is none other than The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. I think this is the Goldsboro edition. It has these pretty sprayed pages. I have multiple copies of this book. Catherine Arden is the author of the Bear and the Nightingale series, the Winter Night trilogy, I think is what it's called. And that is my third favorite series of all time. It is sort of a literary fantasy, historical folklore. It's so good. If you like, again, sort of historical folklore fantasy, I would highly recommend it. It takes place in medieval Russia, I believe. So good. But that's her debut adult series. This is her most recent publication, The Warm Hands of Ghosts. And this follows a nurse and her brother in World War I. So I think Laura is her name. She is home in Canada, and she hasn't heard news from her brother, who's over fighting in Europe. And she gets the feeling that she needs to go find him. And she goes over there, and we follow her perspective and her brother's perspective. His name is Freddie. And there's a supernatural aspect to this book. The sort of horrors of World War I take shape in this novel of a spiritual being, the devil, one might say. So yeah, it has a sort of magical aspect to it, but you're just so entrenched in the atmosphere of World War I. The author really did her research well, I think. And I loved both our protagonists. I love Laura, I love Freddie, and their stories, both separate and when they come together. This was such a good book. It really moved me, and I would love to reread it at some point. I will read anything Catherine Arden writes. Again, if you like historical fantasy, I cannot recommend her enough. She's one of my favorite authors of all time. Her writing is just on another level. But yeah, this is The Warm Hands of Ghosts, 5 out of 5. Definitely one of my favorite books of the year. So those are my favorite books of the year, and I will now jump into what I'm calling my biggest disappointments. So the first biggest disappointment is The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. I have read 2 other books by Naomi Novik that I loved. They were Uprooted and Spinning Silver. They are more of her like adult fairy tale-esque retellings, and I loved both of those books, especially Uprooted. And then I decided afterwards to read her trilogy that started with a Deadly Education, and I liked that book okay. I think I gave it 3 or 4 stars, and then I read the second book, and I thought it was okay, like nothing special, but it was okay. And then I read this third book, The Golden Enclaves, and I didn't really like it at all. So the whole trilogy, in my opinion, did not live up to her other 2 books, Uprooted and Spinning Silver. So this series as a whole sort of disappointed me. I don't have the other two books, but I do have still this third book in this special edition. Not sure how long I'll keep it, but they're so pretty that it's kind of hard to part with them. Yeah, this whole trilogy, I had high hopes for it, and it just didn't quite live up to them. I still would recommend her other two books in her fairy tale sort of standalones, but I'm not sure if I would recommend this still, especially where the series goes. So yeah, this was kind of a disappointment for me. I'm going to keep tapping on this, but I don't have the other two books that I'm going to talk about because I got rid of them. You know, I don't usually like to keep books that disappoint me on my shelves. So, but the other, probably the biggest disappointment of the year for me was A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft. I love Alison Saft's other fantasy books. They're not favorites, but I even did like a little author spotlight on her just because I thought they were all solid reads. I really enjoyed them. And this was her like sapphic adult debut, so I was really excited for it. And then I read it, and I didn't think it was that good. I didn't think it was as good as her previous books. The characterization wasn't as strong, and I think that was my main issue. The plot in concept and theory was really interesting, but I think it just got kind of bogged down by the narrative, and I didn't care about the characters as much as I really wanted to. I didn't feel like they were fully fleshed out. So yeah, that was, and I had such high hopes for that book, and maybe part of that's on me, but yeah, I was a little disappointed by that one. And then the other book is At the End of the River Styx by Michelle Kulwicki. I got this in an Owlcrate subscription box. It's sort of like a Greek-ish mythology retelling. Not strong, but I think we follow two boys. One is working for Hades, I believe, and the other is sort of struggling in reality and kind of on the brink of life and death. And it was okay. I finished it, but it wasn't quite as good as I had anticipated. I had been sort of hoping it would be. And I think some aspects of it definitely felt borrowed from other books I'd read, like sort of pale copycats. Not the whole story, but just like certain aspects. And I just didn't think it did it as well. So yeah, that one kind of disappointed me, but luckily these were the only three books I really had on this list that really disappointed me. So yeah, those are my three disappointments, sadly. And to move on, now the next category is the biggest surprise. So the books that surprised me this year. So the first one was one I read earlier this year, and it is Funny Story by Emily Henry. This book came out, I think, in spring sometime. Sorry if you hear that car. And I had only ever read one other of her adult sort of contemporary literary romances before. I had read Beach Read, and I thought that was okay. It didn't blow me away. I know a lot of people love Beach Read, which kind of boggles my mind. Like, it's certainly not bad, but I don't think it's anything to write home about. And so I liked it, but it didn't really make me want to read any more of her books. But the reason I picked up Funny Story is just because I thought the premise was so interesting. Basically, we have our main protagonist who is engaged to get married, and then, oh, is she engaged or is she already married? I can't remember, it's been too long. But he leaves her for his like childhood romance. It's basically about like the other girl. So like he and this other girl were like friends, and then they suddenly realized that they loved each other and they were meant to be, and she's like the other girl who he was with and who he left to be with her. So we follow her, and then she now doesn't have a place to live, so she ends up rooming with the girl that he left her for's ex-boyfriend, if that makes sense. So it's just kind of a funny plot line, and it's about their sort of relationship. And I really enjoyed it. It was really fun. The main girl in this is a librarian, and I got my master's in library science. I've worked in a library, so it's really fun to see that aspect of it. I think this takes place in like Michigan, somewhere up north, and the atmosphere was really good. I really liked their dynamic together. She was with like this kind of rich, well put together guy, and he's very much like sort of just a gruff, fly by the seat of his pants type. So I really like their like dynamic together. So yeah, a loved funny story. I didn't expect to love this so much, but I really enjoyed it, and it makes me kind of want to read more of Emily Henry's books. Another book I tried to read from her is Book Lovers, because I'm a book lover, so I was like, surely I would like that book. I started it and had to DNF it. I didn't enjoy it at all. So again, I don't know. She's kind of a hit and miss author for me, so we'll see. I am looking forward to her book that's coming out next year, so maybe I'll give that one a try. And the next biggest surprise is the one I just read. You will have seen this before. It's Solomon's Crown by Natasha Siegel. I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars. Was not at all anticipating giving this that high of a rating. This was just a book that had been on my shelf for quite some time. I think I picked it up at like a book fair in my town. It's like, yeah, interesting. It's about, I think I've already talked about it, but in case you didn't hear, it's about Richard I of England and Philip II of France and their sort of relationship. It explores maybe an aspect of their relationship that's been sort of conjectured about if they had an affair or not. So sort of a historical fiction about that, and I really, really loved it. I won't go on too much about it just because I did just talk a lot about it in my recent videos, so I don't want to have you listen to the same thing 5 times in a row. But yeah, I was not expecting to like this book as much as I did, and I really loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. And now I'm going to move on to my most anticipated books of 2025. So again, this is not a comprehensive list of all my it's my most anticipated books of 25. It's not my by month breakdown of all the books I'm looking forward to. So, but these are the ones I'm the most excited for. So without further ado, let me just get into it. The first one, which will come to no surprise, is The Golden Raven by Nora Sakavic. We don't have a cover for that yet, but it's either coming out, again, like I said, at the end of the year or next year sometime. So it doesn't have a set release date yet, but when it comes out, I will read it, and I'm sure it will be at my favorite, the top of my favorites list again next year, as the series means the world to me. The next one is The Dark Mirror by Samantha Shannon. Very, very excited for this. Obviously, I just read The Mask Falling, and it left off on a pretty major cliffhanger. And now that I'm like caught up with the series, I'm just so excited to see what happens next. So yeah, it's called The Dark Mirror. I believe it comes out in April sometime. Maybe I'll put the release dates at the bottom if I remember. But yeah, very, very excited for that. Oh, actually, I think it comes out in February. I think it's like February 25th. But yeah, so excited for that book. The third book on my list here of most anticipated is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. Obviously, you've probably heard about this release. It's a pretty big deal. It's a very beloved series. I read The Hunger Games back when I was in middle school, and it instantly became my favorite series of all time. Obviously, as I've grown up, I've found other favorites as well, but The Hunger Games still will always be in my favorite series list. It sort of changed the way I interact with books. Like, it was one of the first series that really made me feel like I was in the story, and that I remember reading Mockingjay as like a teen or a tween and like crying in the middle of the night once I read like the end, and it was just so sad, and I had such a visceral reaction to that whole series. I was so, it was like real life, you know, like I was like, these people were real to me. And yeah, anyways, just I've always really loved The Hunger Games. I'm not the biggest fan of the movies, just because I read the books way before the movies came out, and I had a visual in my head of what everything looked like, and the movie just didn't quite get that for me. But alas alack. Let me get off this tangent. Anyways, Sunrise on the Reaping is Haymitch's story, from what we've been told. And I love Haymitch, and I'm really excited to see his story. We get told a little bit of it in the original trilogy, but to see it from his perspective, like sort of in real time, I'm very excited for it. I didn't read the book on President Snow just because I wasn't really that interested in his backstory. I did watch the movie, which I thought was interesting, but again, not super invested in his storyline. But I love Haymitch, and I'm so excited to see from his perspective. I'm sure it's going to be a very painful read. Like, I mean, from what I know about the games he plays in, this is going to be devastating, but I'm going to go through every single moment with him, so I am excited to read that book. And then the next book on my list is The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater. I'm a huge Maggie Stiefvater fan. The Raven Cycle. Notice I've talked about my favorite series, All for the Game. I've talked about my third favorite series, the Winter Night Trilogy. And now here it is. My second favorite series of all time is The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. It's another book series that like grabbed my heart like none other has. It has such a special place. It gives me such a specific feeling and mood. Like, I basically lived, it's one of those like era-defining series that I just, well, shaped me as a person, I guess. But regardless, this is a new book from her. It's her adult debut, which I'm very excited about. It's called The Listeners. I don't know much about it, which is kind of on purpose. I want to go in not knowing too much, but I know it takes place in, I think, West Virginia, and it takes place in a hotel. And there's some sort of magical element to it, I believe. So I'm already on board. I will read it. I'm so excited. I love, no one writes like Maggie Stiefvater. No one. Her characterization and her writing is just on a level that no one else reaches. It's such a specific to her style, and I love it. So yeah, very excited for that book. And then the next two I just kind of tacked on. Those are really my most anticipated if I had to list them, but I'm also excited for the Ragpicker King, I think is what it's called, by Cassandra Clare. This is the second in her Swordcatcher duology or trilogy series, I guess. It's the second book. I have not read the first book yet, but I love Cassandra Clare. I've read every single Shadowhunter book, and as much as I would prefer to read a book in that series, what is it called? The Wicked Powers. Very excited for that series, but I'm equally excited to finally read Swordcatcher and hopefully get to that second book next year when it comes out. And then the last book I have listed here is Steel and Spellfire by Laura Weymouth. So I put this one on here because I feel like Laura Weymouth is more of like an underrated author. I love her books. Love her books. And this is a new, I think, duology from her, fantasy. And I just think it should get all the hype because I love her writing. I love her characters. There's always like a sort of foresty, melancholy feel to her writing. And she's an autobi author for me. So yeah, Steel and Spellfire is the first book in her new duology, and it comes out next year. And I don't think she came out with a new book this year, so that makes it kind of more exciting for me, like finally something new from her. But yeah, that is my end of the year book sort of wrap up. I didn't really do a tag, but those are like the takeaways I would say from my year of reading. I'd love to know what your favorite books of the year were, or your biggest disappointments, your biggest surprises, etc. Also, I mean, I'd also love to know your most anticipated books of next year. I'll be doing a separate video on that anyways, but if you have any that you want to talk about already, I'm all ears. So yeah, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. If I don't see you in another video this year, I will see you next year. Really appreciate you watching and hopefully getting some relaxation and entertainment from my videos. So I hope you have a great end of the year, and I hope, if I don't see you, I hope you have a great New Year's. And that's it. So thank you so much. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye.